Please be seated. Early last summer, I was chatting with a friend about a visit that I made to England. And he reminded me, we both had a kind of common history around Trinity Church, Wall Street. And he reminded me something that I'd long forgotten. That the architect that designed St. Paul's Chapel in New York City, the first chapel of Trinity Church, Wall Street, also designed St. Martin of the Fields in Trafalgar Square in London. And I'd been to England a couple of times, but I'd never been to St. Martin's. So my friend encouraged me to go there. And sure enough, you can see how these parishes reflect the work of a single mind. They're almost identical. The scale is a little different. St. Martin's is much, much larger than St. Paul's Chapel in New York across from Ground Zero, but you can really see how the two almost mirror each other, with the exception of some minor decoration. And the first bit of decoration that really sort of strikes you is a large sculpture on the front porch of St. Martin of the Fields. It's rectangular. It's very much a block, a stone block. There's nothing particularly fancy about it, nothing that calls your attention to it. It's very simple, even if imposing. And as you ascend the steps, it's right smack in the middle of the front door. And it says, "The Word became flesh." The stone and the message are so powerful, even if simple. And I really hope to someday discover what the process was or what discussion transpired to erect that sculpture on the steps of the parish. There must be a story behind it, like all manner of things that appear in churches around the world. Someone must have been moved to erect this sculpture. The meaning, of course, to us is somewhat obvious. This prologue of John's Gospel and how it encapsulates the entire good news of Jesus Christ. Now, some churches like ours have holy water stoups in the back and baptismal fonts in the back. And these fonts and stoups really are about reminding us who we are. And we walk into a church, we see the holy water there, water that's been blessed. It's intended to remind us of our baptism. So we touch the water, we make the sign of the cross on ourselves or something of the like. You remember that's what it's for, right? It's to remind you about your baptism. Sometimes I worry that we just go through the motions with things, but it's about baptism. And it marks your entrance into the back of the church as a kind of mini pilgrimage, reminding you from whence you come. Through the water of baptism, initiation into the Christian faith, a kind of lay ordination for ministry, and you make your way from the back door inside into the pews, the place where the community gathers to become one and experience the presence of the risen Lord in the sacrament of the Eucharist. So the font and the stoop remind us who we are and what we're about when we enter this place. Maybe the block on the steps of St. Martin of the Fields at Trafalgar Square, maybe it's intended to remind us who Jesus is. Maybe that's what it's about. Second person of the Trinity. Word made flesh. Jesus spoken at creation, bringing the whole world into being. Prologue of John's Gospel takes us back to Genesis, back to the beginning of the story, anchoring Jesus as part of God's creating, blessing, and redeeming activity. That's all pretty heavy, isn't it? That kind of language. Certainly reflects the mindset of the author of the Gospel according to John. Reflects the questions that people possessed then in the first century about who Jesus was. And it was an attempt to explain how this child of Mary and Joseph could be part of God's divine will, creative process, and redemptive plan. I think the stone at St. Martin's may even do it better than the prologue of John's Gospel in a way. It reminds us that the creative love of God moved from the abstract and the theoretical out there somewhere to a particular place in a particular time, and it became solid and real, tangible. This is what the season of Christmas is about. That's what the incarnation is about. That God doesn't leave God's love out there somewhere, but that God brings God's love in, making it solid, tangible, incarnate, that we might experience it, reflect upon it, and be changed by it. In this season of Christmas, it's very easy to become sentimental about all of this. It's easy to reflect upon a cute child and what that might stir up within us. And that's all perfectly appropriate. But the prologue of John's Gospel reminds us that love doesn't exist merely to be felt as some sort of abstract philosophical tenet. That love exists to move and to work and to animate this life that we live. In this time of Christmas, in this time of the incarnation, we reflect upon God personally present, personally involved, persuasively, not coercively. So if God acts to make love real, present, solid, tangible, manifest, and offers it to us, what is our response as we seek to be faithful? It means that love isn't real. It means that love isn't terribly significant unless you do something about it. It's not enough to feel it. It's not enough to know it. It exists to be lived in the world, in our relationships, in our lives, in the places around that need love most. It means that if God is manifest in flesh, then flesh is somehow stamped with divinity, altered. And we are altered to make God known through our tangible acts and activities in this life. Friends, the good news is that God became flesh and dwelt among us. The challenge for us is to respond in the flesh.